All right, welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Happy Thursday. I'm Deri from Honeycomb, and thank you all for joining me for this webinar. I'm super excited about this one actually, on the topic of the future of junior consultants and this concept that I've been noodling on for a couple of months now, called the exponentialist consultant. And we're live currently on StreamYard, on LinkedIn, on X, and on YouTube. So wherever you're watching from, very good to have you here. If someone wouldn't mind just dropping a quick comment wherever you are to just let me know that you can see and hear me okay, and we will then dive in. So firstly, just to introduce myself, for those of you that don't know me, my name's Deri. I'm the founder and managing director at Honeycomb Consulting Skills Training. I've been in the consulting industry for over 20 years, and the last 10 or so of those working mostly with boutique consulting firms, helping the leaders of those firms develop exceptional teams. And right now, like many of us are, I suspect, I'm trying to live in the future as much as possible. I'm trying to think about what is the world that's coming up and how do we need to respond to that. And a big part of that is the role of future junior consultants. Steve, thank you for checking in on the chat there. Anyone else want to check in on the chat? Just drop a comment and let me know that you're here and you can see and hear me all right. So yeah, I've been getting my crystal ball out a little bit and trying to figure out like what is the future of the junior consultant. Now there's going to be a lot of AI talk in this, as you might imagine, because that really is changing the game in many ways. And I'm going to cover a few different things. Firstly, I'm going to address the what you might have seen in many different LinkedIn posts and things, this idea that consulting is dead. I think it's absolute nonsense, and I'm going to explain why. I'm going to talk a little bit about the reality of what history tells us about the paradigm shift in technology and what that means for the future of jobs and how things adapt. And I've got a much more positive view of the world than many people have. I'm really optimistic about the future of consulting and the value that junior consultants can bring. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about two stages of development that I see for junior consultants. The first one I call the accelerated junior consultant, and that's where many firms are starting to move at the moment. The second one, where I'm going to spend the second half of the talk today, is the exponentialist junior consultant. And this is where things get really exciting and things are possible that were never possible before. And I really want to help just provoke a bit of thinking for you all around this idea of an exponentially more valuable and more useful junior consultant and what you might do if you've got some of those in your team. And then finally, I'm going to give you a 3-point action plan for things that you can do right now to start moving in this direction, because the clock is ticking, shall we say. And then just to say at the end, I've actually written all of this up into it's about a 15-page addendum to our Consulting People report that is now live on our website. And I'll give you the QR code and the link to that. If you can't wait till the end of the talk, then you can go to www.honeycombps.co.uk and go to our download hub, and you'll find a link there where you can download the exponentialist junior consultant as a PDF that you can share with others. So with all of that, let's dive in. So firstly, I want to address this consulting is dead concept. You'll have seen these headlines, consulting is dying and firms don't know it. Strategy consulting is dead. The consulting crash is coming. And there has been some truth behind that. A lot of consulting firms have been struggling and they've been trying to change their business models. And those are kind of thought pieces and people saying, oh, consulting has no future. The reality is we are seeing firms cutting jobs. We've got Deloitte initiating job cuts, McKinsey job cuts, articles in City AM on cuts, struggles and breakups. How is AI reshaping the consultancy sector? So these headlines are real, and I can understand that people are concerned, and there are youngsters trying to get into the consulting industry right now who might be struggling to find jobs. My view is this is a short-term thing. And the reason I think this is a short-term thing is a lot of these firms at the moment are thinking about how can we do the same work but faster with fewer people? How can we protect our margins? And I think those firms they're asking valid questions about inefficiencies in their processes and what they might be able to do differently. But if that's all they're thinking about, they are really missing the big trick. So let me just dive into that a little bit. I'm going to talk about a thing called the Jevons paradox. I don't know whether you'll have heard of this or not. It's something that started to kind of bubble up as people are talking more about AI and the impact on jobs. But this was a bit of research done by a guy called William Stanley Jevons, who was born nearly 200 years ago. And he was looking at steam engines and the impact of steam engine efficiency on coal demand. And simply put, as the cost of using coal in a steam engine fell, what we didn't find was people just used less and less coal, which is the model people are thinking about at the moment. The cost of junior consultants is falling and falling, so we'll just need fewer of them. That's not what happened. Overall consumption of coal went up because the amount of work you could get from that given amount of fuel meant that it made more sense to use more of it because it was more productive. The ROI you were getting per unit of coal was going up. So what that really means is that when the technology improves the efficiency of a resource, the productivity of that resource, it tends to, through history, drive higher overall use of that resource. Or put another way, if the ROI on a thing gets higher, why wouldn't you want to use more of that thing? And this is core to what I see as the future of junior consultants, is the fact that in reality, as we can get more and more value from a given junior consultant, the rational thing to do is to have as many of those people as you possibly can. You're going to want to hire these hyper productive people who are able to produce client value at 10x, 20x, even 100x what the historical junior consultants have been able to do. You're going to want to hire as many of those folks as possible, because the consulting industry, the demand for consulting, particularly the business change that everybody is going through and is just starting to realize how difficult this is going to be, that demand is going to skyrocket. A little bit more history, and then I'll dive into the forward-looking stuff. So when a date that no doubt is cemented in the memories of all of you consultants is the launch of spreadsheets and Microsoft Excel. So Lotus 123 launched in 1983, arguably the most important date in the history of consulting. Not many consulting firms would operate without a spreadsheet. What we found in 1983 was people were saying, oh, this new technology is going to get rid of millions of jobs, millions of bookkeeping jobs, accounting jobs, all of the manual admin and record keeping that was done on paper. All of that is going to go, and it's going to lead to massive job losses. But what it actually led to was job creation, just to different types of jobs. So what you can see in the chart here, that red line is the bookkeepers, the accountants, the auditing clerks, their jobs going, but nowhere near zero, from a couple of million down to about 1.1 million. But then the rapid growth of other jobs that were enabled by this new technology. So in 1983, there were 3.6 million jobs in these domains in the US. By 2015, it was 4.9 million. So the predictions of job collapse, the job apocalypse, which has been widely predicted relating to AI, was the same as we had. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And that's exactly what we can expect to see here. And in fact, we're already starting to see the early signs of that. So we don't have great data on consulting jobs yet, but for software engineers, one of the jobs that you would expect is most impacted by AI. And anyone that's used things like Claude Code can realize how much more productivity an engineer can get when they can use these coding tools. What we've actually seen over the last 5 months is a big spike in jobs for software engineers. So the job apocalypse that was, people were predicting, and as you can see on this chart, it was heading in the wrong direction. Now people are realizing, actually, I've got these super productive people, and why wouldn't I want as many of them as possible? So that's what I expect to see for the consulting industry. And even this week, OpenAI have launched their own consulting firm. Now, they're not calling it a consulting firm. Obviously, it's a deployment company because that's completely different. But when you read what they're actually doing, DeployCo is designed to help organizations bridge the gap and turn AI capability into real operational impact. Now, if that's not a consulting problem statement, I don't know what is. So OpenAI have launched this consulting firm. They've launched this consulting firm with investment from Bain and Company, from Capgemini, from McKinsey. And it's multi-billions of dollars they're putting into this business. And even more than that, the foundational company that they're using to build this with is a firm called Tomorrow, which is based in the UK. They've got offices in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Manchester, London, one in Singapore, one in Australia. But these companies are seeing the UK's consulting capability as a foundation of how they're going to work with organizations to drive AI adoption. And again, this for me is not a sign that the consulting industry is on its knees. It's quite the opposite. Every organization pretty much is going to have to go through a profound change and get help with how they navigate that change. So the consulting industry, demand for consultants, not universally, but many types of consulting, that demand is going to go up. We're going to see hyper productive junior consultants, so the demand for them is going to go up, and that's why overall I see the future as pretty bright for consulting. All of this is my thoughts on this, opinions. I would love you to challenge me and push back and see where you think I'm getting it wrong. So what I see happening here now is 3 stages. Most firms are in stage 1, the legacy junior consultant. The juniors who've been super valuable to firms, they've been the talent pipeline, they've done all the grind of the research and the interviews and the client data gathering and scraping and putting slides together and helping managers and partners be really compelling and tell great stories. Those folks, that role is under pressure to change, and that pressure is accelerating. And firms are starting to realize that, and many of you are already starting to invest in AI tooling to help shift from stage 1 to stage 2, which is the accelerated junior consultant. And this is broadly categorized by in most firms that I see as people trying to do the same work but faster. And that's great. You'll get productivity gains. You will be able to get more client value, and if you're not doing that, you're going to fall behind, and it's a necessary step for most. But stage 3 is where it gets really exciting, because this is where the technology enables things that were just straight impossible before. And I'm going to talk about 3 specific examples that I see as ways that this might come to life. Now, I don't want to paint this as like, oh, everyone but you is doing this right now. That's not the case. This is the future state that I see the junior consultant role evolving into. And the examples I'm going to share are just examples, but they're ideas to stimulate a bit of thinking for you. Before we dive into that, I want to just talk about the accelerated junior consultant. Now, we've mentioned this a couple of times. If you've read our Consulting People report, which came out in January, you'll have seen us talking about the shift in the role of junior consultants there, and the need for validation and replication steps, and the fact that these junior consultants in many firms are going to start working with AI tooling, ultimately AI agents, and that's starting to come to life. I'm not going to go deep on that for now, but there are 2 points I just wanted to make. First is what we're starting to see, and this will be, I think, real for any of you who are working hands-on with AI tools, is consulting is still got a persistent last mile problem. So what I mean by that is an analogy for the last mile of a delivery organization. I spent a couple of years consulting to Royal Mail, and they had hyper efficiency in moving letters and parcels through their distribution centers and getting them out to the delivery offices. But the last mile is the complicated, difficult bit where it's really hard to simplify. And what we're seeing in consulting is AI tooling can get you so far, but there's almost nothing out there that can genuinely produce client quality outputs, particularly if those outputs are slides. Claude these days does a pretty good job of getting to a first pass of slides, but as soon as you look at the detail and you step back and you think, is this genuinely a consulting quality output? Is this genuinely the thing that's going to move the needle for my client? 99% of the time, you've got to edit it pretty heavily. So that last mile of work is still necessary. And I love this quote from Maurizio, a friend of mine's a partner at Infosys Consulting down in Australia, and wrote a great little book called Beyond Slides, which I recommend if you want to have a look at that. And he said, I mean, he's helping big organizations with IT implementations and AI adoption, right? So he's right on the cutting edge of this. And he says the fundamental tension in the scaling of AI sits between our ability to generate results and our ability to verify them. And that is fundamentally the last mile problem. So that's one of the reasons why I don't see junior consulting jobs, even in that accelerated JC stage. I don't see those jobs going away as fast as some might fear. And part of the reason for that is the new model for teams that is starting to emerge, where that junior has a critical role as a validator. So there's still going to be a problem solver, and that's the yellow box on here. So this is a slide I've taken from our AI for Consultants course, which we ran last week. So it's a little bit more dense than a normal webinar slide. Apologies for that. But at the top, you've got partners and directors framing the problem and making sure that value is being driven. You've got an engagement manager who's thinking about QA, and then you've got the core team and the junior role within that. And this is where that accelerated JC role starts to become real. Is they're still engaging with clients, but they're now running agents. They're checking the sources. They're replicating the work from their colleagues to make sure that it makes sense, and they're playing that really important validation role within that. So that's the accelerated JC role, and there are a few skills that are starting to become more important for folks that are stepping into that role. So there's the skill around being really precise about the framing. So the ability to write a prompt that AI answers properly, accurately, and with some level of consistency. It's very difficult to get the Gen AI models to be 100% consistent, unless you take away all of the intelligence and just turn it into a rote learning thing. But you need to get to a level of consistency, and that requires being more precise than ever before about the problem you're trying to solve and the context that you're giving it. And that drives everything downstream of the problem solving. The second skill is about evaluating AI outputs. And this is about optimizing the right use of AI and the right workflow, but it's also the critical skill, which is a new thing that AI has made necessary, is to spot things that are plausible but wrong. And this is getting harder and harder because AI is getting better and better at writing something that looks good. But that critical judgment and the commercial judgment and the client understanding and the nuance, those are still human skills. This is part of the last mile problem that I've been talking about. The third piece is around commercial storytelling. These junior folks still need to own the so what of the work that they're doing. This has always been a challenge for juniors to get that commercial nous. What we will start to see with the accelerated junior consultants is they're getting more exposure, they're getting more cycles of thinking about commercial problems because they're moving faster with these AI tools. So they should be able to get up that commercial understanding curve faster than ever before, but they're going to need some help with that. And then finally, trust building, and particularly rapid trust building, because clients are expecting us to move faster. They're expecting problems solved faster. They're expecting the answers to come in a week rather than a month, or a day rather than a week. And with that, you've got to be able to build trust much faster than you had to before. And particularly because people are starting to see that AI doesn't always get things right. And the last mile problem is true for many organizations. So clients are starting more and more to go back to the humans and say, well, hold on a minute, like, how do we know this is right? So having that ability to build those relationships even faster than ever before is super critical. So those are some of the skills that are being elevated for the accelerated junior consultant, that's stage 2. Some of them are no longer going to be a differentiator. So the ability to conduct research and synthesize across a load of different industry reports and interview notes and web searches, the ability to do all of that is no longer necessary, even today. because AI can do a good enough job of that summarizing. And if you try and do it without, all you're going to do is miss things and be slower. So that ability to synthesize research is falling away. The ability to validate the outputs from the AI is ramping up. And their first draft of writing as well. Now, more and more, these AI tools are pretty good at writing a first draft. So the speed of writing, the ability to get from zero to a strong first draft, which was always a differentiator for the highest performing junior consultants, is that they can think and structure and write very quickly. That no longer is so much of a differentiator. The ability to direct the AI and complete the draft quickly, that last mile skill, is the key thing. So there's some things that are ramping down for the accelerated junior consultant, some things that are ramping up. We're also more broadly seeing that there is a need for just a higher level of technical knowledge than used to be the case. And the ability to work with agents and to problem solve the way that agents are operating is becoming more and more important. So that's what I wanted to say about the accelerated consultant, but that's not the big game in town. That's not the really exciting thing. The accelerated junior consultant is going to have a big impact, but I'm reminded of this quote, which is often attributed to Henry Ford. I don't think he ever actually said this, but for our purposes, it works perfectly well. If I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And the reality is that accelerated junior consultant doing the same work but faster, the reality is that that's a faster horse. It's not the game changer. And the exponentialist junior consultant is more like a flying hover car. It's just a completely different way of solving the problem of getting from A to B. And it will that properly scoped out and properly supported with the infrastructure that's necessary, the ability to solve client problems is going to be just dramatically higher. But in order to get there, we're all going to have to shift our mindsets. We've got to think very differently about the future. If you want to get that uptick, that exponential curve and the value that your junior consultants are creating, we've got to start just thinking quite differently about how do they create value at all. So let me bring this to life a little bit. So the exponentialist junior consultant, so the idea here is that these people are going to be able to create value in ways that were literally not possible before, for all kinds of reasons. And there's three key capabilities that AI has introduced that makes these things possible. So the first is that the sheer volume of data and information and the speed of analysis of those data and information is just orders of magnitude higher than has ever been possible before. The access to all of that information is just something that we never could work with before. That type of information is going to be data coming from client systems. It's going to be the consulting firm's IP or internal secret source. It's going to come from external markets and information feeds from whatever sources are relevant. So the ability to be plugged into real-time data feeds in a way that was just never possible before. And even more than that, it's about capturing every human-to-human interaction in the context of the project and feeding that back in. I was reading some pieces recently about Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter, now X, who's now got a new startup, and he's writing about the truly AI native, AI first organization. And part of what they are building in is that every single interaction, even one-to-ones, is recorded and fed into the organizational knowledge base, stripping out sensitive information, HR related information, for example, but ensuring that the overall knowledge base of the organization, everything that is being discussed, is captured and bubbled up. And that the ability to have access to those levels of data and information is just something that we've never had before. The second thing is orchestrated systems of agents. So at the moment, most people, when they're using AI, are using individual tools to solve individual problems. And in some of the more sophisticated firms, they're building agents to do repeated tasks and do things consistently and faster, where they've embedded them into workflows. There's very few firms at the moment have moved to a model where they've got agents working together, and that is coming. We work with a few software firms, for example, who are right on the edge of this, and we're helping train their professional services teams, their consulting teams, to understand how to talk to their customers about agents and orchestration of agents and to build these in. Now, they're software firms that are building those into their products. Most consulting firms don't have that and should not, in general, try and become a software firm unless you're very clear on why you're doing it and how you're going to do it. But in the future, all consulting firms are going to need to have the agents that are helping with their workflows, and they're going to need to have agents talking to agents, and they're going to need their agents to talk to the client's agents as well. And that orchestrated system of agents is another major tool for unlocking value in ways we've never seen before. And then the third piece that I think is super important is the real-time signals that this allows. And this could be real-time signals from human interactions and communication, real-time signals from market data that we can now ingest and analyze so quickly that we can make decisions faster. And that ability to solve problems and move quickly is going to be dramatically improved as this technology starts to embed. Imagine a world where you've got a junior consultant with ready access to multiple dashboards that are giving real-time signals as to how well your change process is running. And rather than waiting for a weekly catch-up with the workstream leads on a change program to understand the RAG status and have a debate about whether they're on track or off track, they can just see that instantly because the data feeds have been set up in a way that allows them to then escalate to leadership, and problems get solved so much faster. If you're from a boutique, you have got some advantages over bigger rivals here. We work with some very big firms right up to the big four and down to boutique firms. And one thing that is universally true about the bigger firms is they move way slower. So as a small firm, your ability to execute quickly, to get approvals to do things, to build tools and start to iterate, to train your teams and change behaviors, all of those are massive areas of competitive advantage at the moment. The speed of learning, possibly even the trust that clients have with you and your appetite for risk, all of those things things you can use to your advantage. You probably have less access to capital, less access to talent. You may not have the right level of relationships at clients to get access to the client data that you need. So there's pros and cons, but I certainly wouldn't be sitting there thinking like this is a big firm thing and they've got all the advantages, they hold all the cards. You definitely have opportunities to move towards this exponentialist junior consultant world. So what's it going to take to get there? The reality is this requires some real breakthrough thinking, some real innovation to come up with a whole new vision for how you work with clients, how you create value for clients. And there aren't many firms that are finding the space to do that thinking at the moment, but the ones that are starting to reap significant rewards already. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring this to life with 3 examples. So it can be quite hard to get your head around the practicalities of this. So I wanted to say that this is, as I'm sitting here as a consultant with a bit of ex-strategy consultant bias in these, perhaps, these are the things that I'm looking at as ways that these technologies, once they're fully optimized and we're getting the full potential out of them, these are ways that junior consultants can be exponentially more valuable to clients and therefore exponentially more valuable to you. So the 3, I call them hypothesis parallel processing, stakeholder hyper-personalization, and person in the platform. So I'm just going to talk you through these as a way of stimulating a bit of thought for you. So I hope they're useful and interesting. So hypothesis parallel processing, I should have named that differently. It's not that easy to say. So in the past, if you've been doing analytical-based consulting, strategy consulting, the vast majority of those firms, and this was certainly my experience of the 6 years or so that I was at Bain & Company, is we'd solve a problem by starting from a hypothesis. At Bain, we call it an answer first. It's the same thing. And the idea here was to maximize your return on effort. So you can identify the things that are most valuable, the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principles, that 80% of the value is going to come from 20% of the things. And the idea of the hypothesis-led approach was to find those 20% of things so that you could, with some level of economy in the resources that you had and the time that you had, you could generate client value. Fundamentally, that approach is solving for a resource constraint. It's saying we can't do everything, so we have to try and figure out what's most important. And the way that we figure out what's most important is the senior experienced consultants who have seen similar things many times before say, well, in our experience, these are the things that are important. So there's a risk of more incremental answers based on past experience, based on assumptions that have been made. And by definition, that approach excludes a whole ton of inputs. And the only reason we're doing all of that is because we can't do everything. We can't analyze everything at once. So what does the future look like? Well, I mentioned Jack Dorsey earlier. His encouragement towards AI-minded CEOs is to help them think that the cost of exploring a wrong path will near zero. So that allows you to look at a whole bunch of different things. So in consulting terms, the resource constraints that we have, which is fundamentally how much data can we gather and analyze to be able to make an informed decision about the best way forward for a client. We can't gather that much. So we need to use a hypothesis-based approach to simplify that down and pick the bits that we think are most important. If those resource constraints trend to near zero, if the cost of data gathering and analysis trends to near zero, you can access multiple data sources, a much higher volume of data, and you can automate the analysis in ways that were never possible before. That allows a completely different approach. So rather than simplifying down to a single hypothesis that you're going to test and find an incremental answer for your client, you can actually generate 10, 20, 30 different hypotheses, different structures that might make sense, that might work if the data falls in a certain way. You can run analytical cycles on those in parallel and test them all at the same time in a fraction of the time it took in the past. And that allows that junior consultant to spot patterns and opportunities, not just faster than before, but more robustly than before. And so the outcome of hypothesis parallel processing is going to be that the solutions that clients get are more personalized, more innovative, more data backed, and therefore easier for them to buy into and take forward. And therefore, through all of that, going to create more value than ever before in faster times. And that requires a junior consultant who is plugged into all of those data systems and is able to draw on the experience of the firm, not just the one or two partners working on that particular project, the whole firm and the wider market and the client, and pull all of that together into a series of hypotheses that can be tested in parallel. So that's my number one example, hypothesis parallel processing. The second one, stakeholder hyper-personalization. So again, what many consulting firms do is they sit down at the start of a project and they try and map out the stakeholders that they've got. And that's a best practice. A lot of firms aren't even doing that. But they'll look at their client stakeholders and they might put them on a 2x2 where they say, how much interest have they got in our project and how much influence do they have over the outcomes of our project? And they'll map those stakeholders, and then they maybe, if they're really sophisticated, do a bit of sentiment tracking and say whether they are a promoter or neutral or a detractor of your firm at the moment or of the project. They'll typically be man-marked by different members of the consulting team. It's very manual. The ability to tailor messages, tailor outputs, tailor communication style to each of those individuals is pretty limited. There's a time constraint there. Like, we just don't have the time to be in detail and in a sophisticated, nuanced way, analyze the communications from each of these individuals and understand what their preference is. We don't have the time to be creating 12 different variants of an output deck with super high level summaries for some, people-oriented stories for some, detailed technical data for others. Like, we just can't do that in most consulting projects. And so that often leads to messages that don't quite land, to political challenges, to challenging stakeholders and difficult conversations, all things that we train people on how to manage because the communication hasn't been right from the off. It might mean that we're under investing in some individuals and over investing in communicating to others. It drives a ton of inefficiency. So what's the future state there? Well, if you're plugged in to the volume of data and the communication data and the human to human interaction data that's coming through, if you're plugged into your emails and on your Slack messages and your Teams messages, even WhatsApps and phone calls that you're getting with clients, you can then create real-time analysis of all that comms. And with the right agent set up in the right way, that allows real-time assessment of personality, whether someone likes short, sharp, brief, data-driven communications, or whether they are happy to have broader, more meandering chats, whether they're people-oriented or task-oriented. The sentiment that they have in many different domains towards individuals in your team, towards the project as a whole, towards their own colleagues, those things can all be drawn out of the communication analysis. And what that allows is the junior consultant to be the center of an early warning system. They can get flags when clients are not happy about something, or when the mood changes, and they can escalate those very quickly. They can get precision guidance on exactly what to say, who to say it to, when, how, what format, in order to get to the best outcomes. And over time, these agents can learn what really works. What is the trick to getting a tricky stakeholder to soften and be supportive of your project? It also will allow personalized outputs. So as the production cost of outputs starts to trend towards zero, once you've got your base set of information, your base set story, then producing a deep technical appendix versus the easy summary for the CEO, the production cost of those trends to zero, and you can produce multiple versions of it. Everybody can have the access to the version that's most useful for them. So all of that coming together, all of that hyper-personalization of your stakeholders and your client environment is going to mean that, firstly, you're going to have conversations on a new level. You're going to build trust way faster. And we talked about that as being one of the skills that's needed in this new world, is to build trust faster. And through the greater level of emotional intimacy and connection and understanding with clients, and the trust that you're building as a result of that, their ability to change things, follow your recommendations, and get the results that they want is going to accelerate as well. So that's my second thing, is stakeholder hyper-personalization. I'm going to talk through the third thing, and then I'm going to give you a little action plan, and then hopefully we'll have about 10 minutes at the end for any questions that you guys have got. So start thinking about questions and sticking them in the comments, and I'll get to as many as I can. So example 3 of what might be a world for the exponentialist junior consultant is the person in the platform. So at the moment, and certainly historically, the typical kind of consulting project structure has been a time-bound project working on something well-defined, clear scope, resource constrained, time constrained, cost constrained, and broadly 2 flavors. Massive oversimplification, but broadly 2 flavors. One where the consulting team work through a bunch of things, make a recommendation to the client, maybe give them, an implementation plan or some project charters or some guidance on how to set up a PMO, and then they leave and the client cracks on. Or they might come in, bring in different consultants, sometimes consultants from the same firm, but not that often, bring in different consultants to support that change and drive that through. But those consultants can still only do so much. It's a very manual process. So getting manual project updates, having to run weekly calls to understand red, amber, green status across different projects and what the blockers are. There's many, many, many data gaps or delays in getting access to the data that you need to know what's really going on. And there's all of the politics and the personalities that you've got to navigate, which is related to the hyper personalization point I was talking about just now. So ultimately, there are cost constraints, there are time constraints, there are information constraints, and that's a big part of the reason why even working with really good change management consultants, the outcomes that many firms get from their change initiatives are not what they wanted. The results don't match the ambition, and if clients try and do it themselves without that support, the results are often even worse. So how's this going to change? So I see here the exponentialist junior consultant as someone who is plugged into a network of agents, whether that's consulting firm bespoke agents that are precisely tailored to the type of work that you do, whether it's the client agents, whether it's third-party external agents, and they're able to monitor those change efforts. They're able at the start to much more tightly drive alignment of objectives across client teams, across the consulting firm, to make sure that everybody's pulling in the same direction, and that those information, that whether say it's OKRs that you're using, that they're all tied together really tightly, and AI is going to make that way easier to do. The real-time data flows are going to mean that that person can sit there and monitor KPIs against those objectives that you've got. They can monitor the data that's coming through, and effectively they can operate as a canary in the mine type system for a change initiative. So this is about identifying as early as possible the areas of change that are not going on track. They're able to track sentiment towards change because they've got information flowing from all of the client conversations and communications that are going on. And they're able to track data indicating that one change initiative isn't having the impact that we wanted it to have. They're able to spot the one that's outperforming and then quickly cascade that across the rest of the organization. So all of that activity is going to just be possible so much faster at such a higher level of detail that the junior consultant who's in the center of all of that is going to be able to quickly triage and advise and escalate, so that the leadership team, who are foundational to supporting and driving that change, know exactly when and where and how to intervene to adjust something to keep the program on track. So by being plugged into that network of agents and having access to data and dashboards in real time and more detail and more nuance than we've ever had before, the exponentialist junior consultant is going to be able to make sure that that change actually sticks and that the benefits of the program are realized so much faster. So those are three ideas, three examples of how consulting firms in the future, I believe, will work in a completely different way. And the need for that junior consultant, the role of that junior consultant, is going to be much more about the commercial understanding, the ability to work with agents and to ensure that they're all talking to each other in sensible ways, liaising with the technical team that you're going to need as well, and that they're able to influence and talk to clients in ways that are going to accelerate their learning of the commercial side of the business, and they're going to be much more deeply plugged in to the client organization than ever before. And I think it's a super exciting time to be moving into this world where the consulting industry is going to be able to create value in ways that it's never been able to do before. So, as I say, I got my crystal ball out at the start of this, and I'm living in the future a little bit. And this may all feel like it's quite a long way off, but I think there's three specific actions that you and your team can take right now to understand how this might play out for you. And if you're in any way thinking beyond the next quarter and performance and hitting your revenue targets, if you're any way thinking a year or 2 years ahead, I think this is a critical set of activities to do. So the first of those is an audit. The second is a brainstorm. The third is to define the future. What I mean by an audit is to look at what your junior consultants are doing now, and not what the role description says, not what's in your competency framework. Like, what are they actually doing day to day, and how are they doing it? And classify those tasks into three different buckets. So one would be in a couple of years' time, AI is going to do this end to end. We don't need a junior consultant doing this anymore. Something like desktop research, for example. Number two would be AI is going to help a lot with this. It's going to get us to the last mile, but we're still going to need a human to finish things off. And step three is this is always going to require human judgment all the way through. And if you put it into those three buckets and then look at the last two buckets in particular, that is going to give you an indication of, based on where you are now, based on your current set of activities that the junior consultant does, the core of what the role is going to be in the future and which bits of it are going to fall away. So that's going to help you understand what that future core needs to be. That's a relatively straightforward process. Then the brainstorm piece of this is you've got to get your senior team together, and you might need external help depending on how able they are to step out of the day-to-day and to think innovatively and to get past their own limiting beliefs about what's possible. And the goal of getting them together is to try and create a vision as unconstrained as possible as to the ways that you're going to create exponential value for clients in the future. What is it? What is that state 2, 3, 4 years from now of how you're going to operate, how you're going to be plugged in with clients, what you're going to need to make that work, that is the way that your firm is going to go from where you are today to creating 10x value for clients out of the same set of resources. And once you've got that big unconstrained vision, you really need to make it concrete. Narrow that down to a set of big ideas, things that are tangible, still stretching, tangible, and where you can think about what's the first small step towards them. So you take those big ideas and you work back towards what am I going to do to test those today? And then you can start building. Then you can start to build some agents and test them and talk to clients and try and understand what's it going to take to get from where we are today to that big idea being a reality. And then you can move on to define the future for the junior consultant role. So if you take those big ideas, then you've got a concrete vision of what that future is probably going to look like for you. And you've got to ask yourself 3 questions there. So firstly, once we're operating on this model, who is the exponentialist junior consultant that we need? What are the characteristics of that person? What capabilities do they need? And now by that I mean when they come in, like are they grads that we're hiring from particular backgrounds? Are they subject matter experts that we're bringing in? Like what's the profile of person that we're bringing in? You then need to be very clear on what is it that they're going to have to become capable of. Not necessarily what they're capable of on day one, but what are you going to need them to be able to do? And then thirdly, if we're going to bring in these people and we want them to be able to do that stuff, how do we make them successful as quickly as possible when they come in? How do we minimize our time to value from these new consultants coming in? And how do we then also develop them sustainably over time? And if you can be clear on your big ideas for your future and clear on those 3 questions, you've got a very good idea of what the future state for your junior consultants is going to be and what it might take to start stepping towards that. And that is going to give you an action plan that you need. So those 3 steps are what I would encourage all of you to do if you want to get onto the front foot with this shift in the consulting industry that we're going to start seeing towards creating exponential value for clients in ways we've never had before. So any questions, comments, chuck them in and I'll get to them. I did promise at the start that I'm going to give you all something for coming here today. So I've written up more detail on this thesis and a lot of the things that I've talked about today into what is essentially an addendum to the Consulting People report that we published in January. So it's called the Exponentialist Junior Consultant. And you can go to the download hub on our website. I will chuck that in the comments as well. Or scan that QR code and download a copy. And I'd really encourage you to share this with the leaders in your firm and try and stimulate some thinking for them. Because what you cannot afford to do at this stage of the evolution of our industry is stick your head in the sand and just be stuck in that legacy junior consultant bucket, because someone's going to come and eat your lunch pretty quickly if you try and do that. So you've got to get your head up and start thinking forwards about this stuff. And I wrote this because I think people are being way too negative about the future of the consulting industry. And there's real reasons to be super optimistic, but it's going to take action to get there. So then finally, if you've found this session valuable, then sign up and you'll find out about more of them. We also publish multiple free articles on our Substack blog and LinkedIn posts left, right, and center. And we run webinars at least one a month, often more. So if you scan that first QR code there, you can get access to all of those free resources that are going to help you, whether you're a consultant or a leader of consultants and trying to grow your firm. And then if you want to chat to me about any of these things, always happy to chew the fat on any of these topics, then my Calendly link is down there, and the little QR code will let you grab 30 minutes in my diary as well. Would love to have that conversation. And in the meantime, I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions that anyone's got. I hope you found that helpful. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate you joining. All right. Thanks all. I appreciate you spending an hour with me on a Thursday lunchtime, and I look forward to catching up soon.